All right, now that you know how to open and close dialog boxes, let me show you how to pass data to your dialogs. So here back in app component, when opening this edit course component, let's say we want to pass the ID of this course. Passing the data is very easy. Here in the open method, you pass a second argument. In this object, we're going to have a property called data, and we can set this to any values or any objects that we want to pass to our dialog box, to our target component. This can be a simple number, it can be a string, or it can be a complex object. So let's say in this object, we're going to have a property called course ID, and we want to set this to 1. So this is how we pass data to our dialogs. Now on the receiving side, we should be able to read this data. So let's go to edit course component.ts. When the dialog service opens this component in a dialog, it's going to pass our data in the constructor. So here I'm going to add a parameter called data, and this can be called anything. It doesn't have to be data. And the type of this parameter should be any, because we can pass anything here, right? Now, in this demo, I simply want to display this in the console. So data is this data. Now back in the browser, we get this error. Can't resolve all parameters for edit course component. This is an error that you may see from time to time. And basically this has to do with dependency injection. Let me explain why. You know that when our application starts, Angular is going to compile each component in the component tree. In this case, it's going to compile this edit course component. So first it looks at the constructor. It looks at all the parameters we have defined here, and it's going to inject those parameters into this constructor. That's dependency injection, right? Now, if we had, instead of this parameter of type any, if we had something like service of type course service, would we get an error here? No. Let's verify this. So I'm going to generate a service called course service. Okay, beautiful. Now let's go to app.module and register this service as a provider. So here in the providers array, I'm going to add course service. Okay. Now back in our edit course component, let's import this course service. Beautiful. And also let's temporarily remove this data. So back in the browser, the error is gone. Beautiful. So if our parameter is of type course service, we don't get that error anymore. Now let me revert this back to what we had earlier. So data of type any. The reason we got this error earlier is because Angular doesn't know what to inject into this constructor, because any can be anything. So to fix this problem, we need to have a closer look at dependency injection. Let's go back to our app module. Here in the providers array, you have seen two ways to register dependencies. One way is the simple way where we simply add the name of a service here. You have also seen another way using the provider object. So we pass an object with two properties: provide course service, and then use class course service. You have seen this a few times earlier in the course, right? So with this, we're basically telling Angular that whenever we have a parameter in a constructor of a class, and the type of that parameter is course service, use this class. Now, this first way of registering a dependency is basically a short way to the second approach. So to solve the problem with our any parameter, we need to register some kind of dependency here. So I'm going to duplicate this line. Now for this provide property, what should we add here? Any? It doesn't make sense. It's kind of weird. We're telling Angular that whenever the type of a parameter of a constructor of a class is any, use this class. It's kind of weird. And that's why we have this compilation error. So how can we solve this? Well, before I show you how to do this, I want to introduce you to a new term. In Angular, what we have here is referred to as token. This is what we call an injection token. And this injection token determines the type of parameter of a constructor of a class. Now, when dealing with non-class parameters, like when we have a parameter of type number or a string or an interface, we need to create a custom injection token because that type cannot be used as a token. We cannot have number or string or any here. We need to create a custom injection token. So how can we do it? Very easy. Let's go back to our edit course component. So here I want to create a custom injection token for this parameter. So I'm going to export a constant and call it dialog underline data. Because this is a constant, all the letters are uppercase. Now we set this to a new injection token. This class is defined in Angular/core. Look, it's defined in Angular/core. Now, here in the constructor of this class, we need to pass a string that determines the name of this token. So we give it an arbitrary name, like dialog underline data. Now we have an injection token, so we can go back to our app module and use this custom token in our provider object. So back to app module. For the provide, I'm going to use dialog underline data. Now, what should we use for the class? But here we don't want to deal with a predefined class because we're dealing with an object that is passed at runtime. So instead of the use class property, we can use value. And here we can pass an actual object. So I'm passing a blank object that doesn't have any properties. Now with this, we're telling Angular that whenever the parameter of a class is marked with this custom injection token, that is dialog underline data, pass this empty object as the value of that parameter during dependency injection. Okay? So the final step is to go back to our edit course component and mark this parameter with our custom injection token. So we have a decorator function that is called inject. This is also defined in Angular/core. Now, as the argument to this decorator function, we need to pass our custom injection token, that is dialog underline data. Now we have a compilation error here. Looks like my auto import plugin didn't work. So yes, it couldn't add that here. So we should import the inject function from Angular/core. All right. Now let's see if these changes have solved our problem. So back in the browser. Okay, the error is gone. Beautiful. Now back in the edit course component, here in the constructor, we want to log this data object in the console. So let's put it back here. Now back in the browser, I'm going to click this button. And now let's take a look at the console. So we have this empty object, and this is the object that we defined during dependency injection. But the purpose of this lecture was to pass some data to our dialog. So earlier in our app component, when opening this dialog, we passed this complex object. So instead of that blank object, we want to get this object here. I explained all this so you know exactly what happens under the hood. In this particular case, we don't really have to define a custom injection token. This is actually defined in the dialog module in Angular material. So let's go to our edit course component. On the top, we don't need to define this custom injection token. Let's delete this line. Now here in the constructor, we're going to inject the injection token that is defined in the dialog module. That is md underline dialog data. Let's import this from Angular/material. Okay, beautiful. Now finally, let's go back to our app module. So we don't need to register this dialog data anymore. Because when we import the md dialog module, this will automatically register all the dependencies. So there in that module, there is a provider object that associates that custom injection token with a predefined object. Now, one last thing. Further up, we have a reference to this dialog underline data that we just removed. Let's delete this. Beautiful. So now let's test the application. Back in the browser, let's open this dialog and look in the console. Now we have this object that we receive in our dialog. This object has the course ID property set to 1. So here's the lesson. We can pass data to our dialogs using the second argument of the open method of the dialog service. Now on the target component, in this case edit course component, in order to receive that data, we need to add a parameter in our constructor and decorate this parameter with the inject decorator and use md underline dialog underline data as the custom injection token. As simple as that.